Let's put a marker in. All right, today we are going to be continuing on with our Pong game. Now, it's not like a full Pong game. I don't necessarily feel the need to add in paddles to make it playable. And I think that we can just keep the balls bouncing off the sides. What I really do want to do is have it so that when it hits the side, it increments the score for the other one. And I think there's a couple things that we are going to want to do here. First of all, I'm going to want to do this the classic way. And by classic, I mean a way that you have to do without the observer pattern. Ambient Pong. Utsby, good morning. Yeah, sort of. It's just like hanging out here and you don't have to play it. It's idle Pong. We just invented a new genre, idle Pong. Okay, so what does that mean to us? In our main game, we have the draw here, and so here's where we have the ball update. We could hand the score in. Now we have two scores. We have the player score and the AI score. So I could, for example, come into the ball, in update, take in the two scores. So this would be the player score and the AI score. Oh, you know what? Before I get too far into this, I want to do this in a branch and not in like the main thing. So where are we? We're in observer pattern in JavaScript. It's gonna branch off here. I wish I could make this bigger so that you can see the text better, but unfortunately, GitKraken doesn't have that interface ability. I should reach out to them and ask, wait, can I? There's this. Oh, okay. You just can't do it with command, like Control plus or anything. You just have to do it down here. Okay, never mind. I got 130%. There we go. All right, so we're gonna create a branch here. And I'm gonna name this sort of like not observer, like not using observer pattern. And so that way, you know, whatever we do here can sit in this branch. Now, when I do the actual talk, I may actually just live code this. And we'll see how we go from there. But okay, so we have the player score, the AI score. When we bounce, we need to know which one we bounced off of. Did we bounce off the right side or the left side? And so we could do this a couple different ways. We could just have the bounce return something, or we could have the bounce be aware of where we turned, and it increments the score. So then in here, we pass in a player score and the AI score, and then we bring it into bounce. Player score, AI score. This is the Y, so up and down. We don't get any points with that. Here we get it with the X and the Y. So this dot reverse velocity X. Okay, so this one is, this location X is less than 0. That's the left-hand side. That means the AI score made a point. So it's gonna be AI score. Now, do we have? We don't have anything, so we're gonna need an increment method here. And that is gonna be this dot score plus equals to 1. And that's pretty much it. So here in ball, we're gonna do AI score dot increment. And then the other one, we're gonna do player score dot increment. Now, if I just do that and we refresh the game, are the score numbers gonna go up? No, it's gonna crash. Cool. Type error, can't access property increment, AI score is undefined. Why is AI score undefined? So we're passing in here, we're passing in here, we're passing in here. In game, we're not passing in here. That's a problem. What's the order that I'm passing in? It's player, then AI. So player score, AI score. Let's try this again. There we go. And so now our scores are increasing. If we do our fun sort of like a craziness, where we add balls, a 10% chance of adding a ball every single frame, then we'll see our scores increase like crazy. Good luck fighting this off with your paddle. But luckily I'm not having to actually figure out how to make this into good gameplay. So, oh, that's an interesting problem. We need this to essentially be a little bit to the left now. But this is one of the ways for us to do that. Let's go ahead and save your changes, and we're gonna push this on up. So we have, I guess, like implemented, like it's not, there's nothing observing about this. This is passing in score to ball. This is for incrementing the score when the ball hits one of the player's sides. Wait, is there no incrementing? There's increment. It's for, and if I do ing on that, it's not real? I want that to be real, so I'm gonna commit it. And it's a real word now that I'm totally using, and is fine. Everything's fine. Okay, I'm gonna push those changes up. I'm gonna push that branch. We have all this code up in bang repo command, so you can go in and find that. It is in a different branch now, of course. We're not using observer pattern in that branch. We can now come back to our master branch. Which sort of resets everything. And we're back to this and not having a working like, a scoring system. But I think, that's fine. So, observer pattern. There's actually a couple ways for us to do this here. We can create like an entire official event system, which would be an event class that we instantiate. And then we're going to register into that class. And so we're going to register observers into that class, and we're going to register, I guess it's not really register. We'll pass that an instance of the observer class down, event system down. Let's go ahead and create that. So we're gonna have an event system.js. In index, we're gonna have script source, an event system, and class event system. In our constructor here, we're going to instantiate, we're going to have a list of observers. And it's just going to be an empty array. Now, if we have a list of observers, we also need a way to add the observers. So we're going to have, we can have like add observer, or we can have like register. And this takes an observer. And we're just going to say this dot observers dot push observer. Now we're not protected by any types because this is JavaScript, and I'm not using TypeScript for this. I just sort of want to show like the basics of doing this with a weekly type system, and like whether or not this makes sense in that case. Also, that would require me to like do work to set up the compiler, and even though it's not that much work, it's enough that I was like, let's just do basic JavaScript. Okay, so we have we can now add an observer onto here. The other things that we're going to need to do with this is we're going to need to be able to notify the observers of what happened. So we're going to have a notify. And this is going to take in an event. And we're going to loop through all the observers and let them know of the event that happened. So this dot observers dot for each observer, and then observer dot on notify. So this is a function that you must have if you are an observer. Strongly typed language would help us like enforce this. Like you must have this on notify in order to like be in this list. But unfortunately, we're not really like. Hopefully, won't get any errors with this. It's going to be up to us to make sure that we program it correctly. So on notify, and we just pass it the event. So that way, everybody gets it. If something wants to be notified twice, they can just register themselves twice. Okay, so that's on notify. I don't necessarily. It's gonna be up to us to determine if we really need more methods on here, like remove a unobserver, or something else like that. Okay, so that gives like we have the ability to register things, we have the ability to notify things. Now, there is an argument, and I've seen like both cases, and I sort of like I go back and forth myself. Should I define what the events are? And so in this case, I could put this part of the event system. It might make sense to put them here. Is to have essentially this dot events equals, and then essentially create myself an enum, as it were. So I could say scored is an event, and I guess it would be player scored, and that would be player scored. The actual string here actually doesn't really matter. It's the it's this specific key that's actually what's really important here. And then we can have AI scored. And these could be our events. Now, that means that when we notify them, they're going to grab out the event and pass essentially one of the arms of this object in through event. We can even do some testing here and ensure that event essentially is one of these arms by looping through and like checking that at runtime. That of course increases the runtime. And so we don't really want to do that if possible, especially in a game where we're trying to do something at like 60 frames per second or higher. But okay, this is the event system. Now we're gonna want to, the score is gonna register itself as an observer. So let's come into the game and set this up for ourselves. Let event system equals new event system. And we're going to pass this event system into the player score and the AI score to let them sort of register themselves if they so want to. So we're going to take an event system here and event system here. Now in score, oh, and I completely forgot again. We want this to be in a different branch. So let's go ahead and do that right now before I like commit and push these changes up. This is going to be class observer pattern. So in our score, we're taking in the location and an event system. We are going to be registering ourselves with the event system. So event system dot, what did I call it? Did I call it register? I called it register. And it takes, so if we take a look at, interesting, okay. Register doesn't really know what it takes. At least it couldn't figure out. Clearly it takes an observer that gets pushed in here. So the observer is the score itself. So I'm just gonna push in this. So this specific instance of the score is gonna be registered in here. Now we know that we need an onNotify method that takes in an event, and it's going to need to use this event to figure out what is happening. So if we now we also now need to know which score we are. So we need like a title, a label. We need like something to know: are we the player score or are we the AI score? It's not really a type, but we need some like kind of I guess like label for it to know what we're looking for. So let's go for I mean, I guess we could say like is player, and we can default this to true. We're looking at the player here. So this dot is player equals, let's actually call this is player. So now we know we're gonna listen for the event that is the player's event. So if this event is equal to, and here's where we can actually, we could potentially reach into our event system. So now that I'm thinking about it, let's not put the events here. I kind of want to make this like a static thing, but it might be better to even keep this outside of the class itself and just put this out here. And we'll just say const events equals this entire thing. We could even go like that to make it like a true constant that lives. This should be available to us in score now because JavaScript. So it's going to be player scored or AI scored. So if we're in the player, it's the player scored. So if the event, so we care about, if the event equals, what is it? Events dot player scored, and this dot is player is true. So if we are the player and the player has scored, then this dot score dot, oh right, we're gonna want an increment. Add an increment method here, this dot score plus equals to 1. This dot score dot, I guess it's gonna be this dot increment. All right. Now there's the because like both of them are going up, we need to make sure that like everyone gets every event, and I think that's like the key here is everyone gets every single event in this system. So this specific instance of score is going to need to ensure that they're incrementing for the right one. And that's going to be interesting because like the other one is going to be very similar, right? It's just going to be like, hey, we're, you know, well, actually, no, this is right to like ensure here. We want to increment only if we're doing this. Else if the event is equal to, doing this very similar here, I could also just do a nested if statement. So this is going to be events.ai scored and this not this dot is player, then this dot increment. So I think this is going to work. Let's find out. I haven't like tried this specific combination of interesting logic here. Basically, this looks a lot similar to, hey, look, if the player scored, increment. The problem is both of them are sort of registering themselves, so they need to be able to handle this separately. Okay, so we have that going in there. We go to back to the game, and those are registered as they were with the event system. Now we need the ball to store a copy of the event system. So we create the new ball. So let's go ahead and hand it the event. This is really just a reference to the event system instance. So back to ball, in a constructor, we're gonna have the event system, and we're just gonna store that away. So this dot event system equals event system. Now, when we bounce off of X and Y, we're going to now call the event system dot notify and then hand it the specific event that happens. So this dot event system dot notify, and it's going to be the event. So we can do events dot. So this one's the left one, so that would be the AI scored. This dot event system dot notify events dot player scored. Okay. Let's I don't think I've forgotten anything. I've passed. Oh, you know what? We're potentially creating a whole bunch of events in here, like adding balls. Let's make sure that the event system gets added in here too, in case we decide to do that, which we probably will. So let's find out if this works or if we get an error. It did not work. Did we get an error? We got no error whatsoever. So that's ooh, no, okay, so we got an error. We didn't get an error, it worked. On the left-hand side, when it hits the left-hand side, nothing happens. When the right-hand side hits, it updates both of them. So that's fun. Let's see what we did wrong. So the ball is getting updated. Where is that? Ball and draw. So the ball is getting updated here. So here's our update. We do our bounce. It goes onto the left-hand side, and so it calls notify and passes in events.ai scored. So we go into the event system, it does notify, passes in the events.ai scored, it loops through all the observers and passes in this event and calls the onNotify method. Now in the score, we have onNotify, pass in this method, and so we say, okay, if the events equals events.player scored, and this is the player. Okay, so let's do the AI scored one. If if the event equals events.ai scored, and this is not the player, we want to increment this specific instance. I want to console log. Is this happening? So called. Let's see if we get a any kind of like notification here when this happens. So we go called on the right-hand side, and both of them updated right off the beginning. That was the other thing I wasn't sure about is, are they really both getting updated, or are they not updating until like the right one is called? And the left one didn't get called at all. Oh, no, I got 4 here. We can, here, let's refresh and see that it gets called on the left-hand side. It gets called twice. Interesting. And we can also pass in the event just to see what is happening there. Once for each score instance. So twice called player scored. You're right. Absolutely. Thank you, Uspi. That is true. Both the scores are being both called. Okay, so called AI scored, player scored. Okay. That like the events are correctly the events are being like passed in correct. So what we need to make sure is this specific score that we want to increment. Like, so we have this score that's like a completely separate score than this score. Now they share the same code base because it's class-based object-oriented system. So when this one gets its event, we want it to increment, but not this one to increment. So basically, wait a second. Are they both considered players? I think so. Hold on a second. When I create the scores, AI score, so taking the event system, and also we need to pass in. So where's our AI score? You are false. That will do it. It will help if you ensure that they're different things. So the AI scored, it got a point. The player scored, it got a point. Okay, we've got it running now. Now, so I think the idea is with the notification system, every single observer gets every single event, even if they don't care about the event. So it's up to them to sort of filter out and only listen to the ones that actually are important. And that this separates it out. So now the balls don't have to care about who is listening for the score. And this actually allows us to do some interesting things, because we could have like the arena itself listen, or we could have like all sorts of things listen for the score event. We could have everyone listen to like any kind of score and basically have some kind of like particle system or anything else. So if I add in, I wonder if I can add like something else in. What could I add in? If I do I'm not sure like what I would want to add in here to like Pong is such a simple game. Win condition observer. Absolutely, yes. That is a great point here. So our main game isn't, and I think this is now where it falls apart. If I wanted a win condition, and I want to just have that here, like, okay, you're like, if the score is this, if the score is this, we're going to draw it out. Unfortunately, because like draw arena is just a function like this, we're now going to need to refactor our essential draw arena, or like the updating of the game, into a class so that it can register itself as an observer. So let's do that really quickly. So we're going to create a this is essentially going to be like the drawing, the scenes. Maybe we call this like the arena. To index script source arena. So we're gonna have class arena. This is a problem with object-oriented game development that I've noticed is once you start like building these, especially with like singletons like these, you kind of feel the need to like keep on creating them because they sort of become tightly integrated. And so I've separated things out using the observer pattern, but at the same time, I'm now tightly integrated into the entire observer pattern. So we're gonna have a constructor, we're gonna take in the event system. And I don't know if there's anything else that I really need to take in right now. I could, now this could internally, yeah, okay, so we're gonna take in the event system. This dot event system equals event system. We're gonna want a render. Now the render is gonna take what we have here for draw arena, and it's gonna just do that in the arena here. So this, you are render now. So no stroke, fill, it just does this. Everything is, the only difference here is the arena color, which means that we can store this internally. So this dot color equals, I think I have this stored, like we're not gonna need you anymore. Here's the arena color. And so now instead of arena color, it'll just be this dot color. I mean, in this way, it's a little bit easier to sort of like encapsulate and hold on where the colors are. So this type of object-oriented programming is nice for that. I know exactly where to go to like set the color if I want to change it. Now we want to register the arena because we want to render out completely different screens. Let's say I want like a big like game over to like happen instead of the arena, as it were. So we're gonna have to, we'll have like a notify. So an on notify. We're gonna take an event. And we're gonna have to have like an internal state ourselves. So this dot is playing. And we're gonna default to true. And so if we're playing, this happens. And if we're not playing, we want something else. So if this dot is playing, then we're throwing you in. This is like the full arena. Otherwise, we probably want just like this giant text, game over. So we can do text, is it text wait? I think it's text wait. Is gonna be something like I don't know, 124, let's just say. I don't know if that's right or not. We have then text, a giant game over, in the position of, let's just say, width divided by 2 minus just some arbitrary amount, like whatever this text is. So that's going to be, I don't know, like 124 divided by 2 maybe. Like, let's do like 64. Let's just see what that is. And then a y, maybe this is going to be height divided by 4. So 1/4 down is where we're going to start the text. I don't think it's at the beginning. So let's have that there. Now we're going to have the arena that is rendering this entire thing. So if we come back to here, we're going to have that arena. We have to initialize this after the event system because it takes that in. So the arena equals new arena. And we're going to pass in the event system. Now in draw, where we have this background draw arena, this is now going to be arena.render. And we don't have, well, I think we can try this now. Yeah, everything still works. And that's because now we're just drawing it through the arena. I don't need that console log anymore. Now I want this to happen. So we want this like specific event. So let's come into our event system and add an event into here, which is game over. Which means that in the arena, we can now listen for that. So if event is equal to event.gameover, then I want to say this dot is plain now is equal to false. In order to send this event, the score now is going to have to be, so this is going to be really interesting. The score is a listener, is an observer for the event. It's also a, what is it called? It's also a notifier of that. So we're going to have to store it in here. So this dot event system equals event system. And I forgot in arena, I did it backwards. Here's arena. I don't need to store it in here. What I need to do is register. So let's go event system dot register this. Now in the score, when we have to have an update now for the score. Or do we really have to? So on notify, when we increment, if now our score is, let's say 7, so let's actually figure out what that is. So when at equals 7, let's just say like 7 is the win point. And I think the event that we created is just game over. So we are now going to do this dot event system dot notify a events dot game over. Of course, we're not just going to do it on one thing. We're going to have to say if this dot score is greater than or equal to this dot win at, then this happens. Now this, we potentially don't want to like just do a generic game over, and so I'm going to leave these as separate for right this second, because we may want to do something other than just game over. We may want to like track who won. It might be important, but for right now, let's just have the game over happen as soon as somebody gets 7 points. So this is now interesting. Score is both it emits events, and also the score is listening for events. The arena is specifically just listening for events, meaning that it's just registering itself with an event, and it has this on notify, and it sets like whether it's playing or not. So let's go ahead and see whether or not this works. Frizzix, thank you so much for the subscription. With your Twitch Prime subscription. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope you have a wonderful day. I wish I had like some big like overlay thing that I could do whenever I do that, but I've never, built one. But it's on my list. Okay, so moving in. Let's actually try. I want to see what I have. Like, does it? Thank you, ball. That's like the worst position you can be in. So this all should still work. We still get points like this. There's a problem here. If I go to 7, this is gonna take forever. So there's a really easy way for us to fix this without speeding up the balls, which is we're just going to uncomment that line and add a lot of balls. That's okay, so it worked. Now the error was text weight is not defined. So what happened was we got, like, this event happened, we switched over to is playing false, and we tried to do this, and text weight doesn't exist. And I think that's because the score, it's text size. Text size. Let's try that instead. Oh, and we get our game over as soon as it hits. Now, we notice like the arena disappears, which is like kind of what we expected. The balls are still like being created and everything else is happening because those are in a completely different loop. And it's just the way we've set the events up. The main sort of like game file is completely ignorant of what's happening event-wise, which is unfortunate, but there's not really anything that we can do about that. So we'd need to have some kind of like entire game state, or the arena itself would have to be in charge of updating all these other things, which could, we could definitely do here. So if we take a look at what's game is happening, it's updating, all of the balls. It's in charge of adding all these balls, and it's rendering. If I make it so that you add all these things to the arena, then it can be in charge of that, and it will essentially stop rendering everything. So let's say, because we could have an update method here, and we have a render method already. So let's store. So in here we have the arena, the player scores. The arena should, like, these should be drawn through the arena. So the arena should hold the scores. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. In that case, these don't even need to be here at all. We can just remove them. So the scores go away. These two scores now need to be stored inside the arena, right here. So we're gonna do this dot player score equals that. This dot AI score equals just to a new score, and we're just creating a new score. It's gonna handle storing these. Apparently we need to move the AI score to the left a little bit. So let's make it like more like 100 to the left. What else? Now we need to, do the scores need to update? No. So what's interesting is like they can update, but they don't need an update. They just need a render. So let's render them. So in render here, we're going to do this dot player score dot render, this dot AI score dot render, and there we go. These renders now. All right, so let's continue like clean up from the player scores. They don't get rendered here. And that's the player scores being done. I think everything should still work. Yeah, everything still works exactly as expected. Also, as soon as we reach the end game, they're still existing, which I think is fine. I didn't move over like left enough. Oh, you know what? I moved it down. I didn't move it to the left. With this score, in the arena, we created this. That needs to be, nope, keep that. I think this was 65 down. This needs to be like at least 100 to the left. But the other thing is, we don't really need this to be 100 to the left, do we? We want it to stop rendering if we're not playing. So we just move this into here. No, is playing. If we're playing, we render the score. Okay, perfect. So now let's try this again. Score should disappear as soon as we reach 7 points. Excellent. Time for the balls. So let's remove balls, go away from here. The balls, we are going to take the balls, steal them away from here and put them into the arena. So when we create the arena, we're gonna have a list of the balls. So this dot balls, this dot balls equals, and then just an array which includes a new ball right off the bat. We also, this like entire drawing all the balls, we can now throw into the arena, into the render. So again, only if we're playing, and I want these to happen over everything else that's gonna happen down here. So for each, oh, this is update. You need to be down here. And you'll be this dot balls. Okay, so this dot balls, you're gonna just update and run through all those. Okay, so that makes that pretty simple. Add ball. So this is calling this add ball function. Well, this can now be removed from the main game and go into the arena here. Which means that in update, we could just call this dot add ball. And so this is now where we're going to take care of it. So you're gone. We're gonna keep the background as black. We're going to render the arena. We also need to update the arena. So we're gonna call arena.update. And then this balls.forEach render, well that, we don't need that anymore. So take you away, come back to arena, and in render, only when we're playing, let's render all of the balls. I think this will work. Let's find out. That was a lot of changes. Okay, balls is not defined, arena line 42. Because you need to be this dot. Okay, so we're still creating a ton of balls. The scoring system is still working, and we're still able to get we're able to get this game over. And now nothing else is happening. In fact, the balls aren't even updating. The score is not updating. If I wanted to now figure out who won, Well, we could definitely send over like a specific event. So instead of just game over, we could have player 1 and this would be AI 1. Now in our score here, this is where, you know, our if statement has to be unique for this. If this dot score is win at and this means the player scored, this means that the player won. Typing is hard. Player 1. And in this case, it's the AI 1. Now in the arena, we can definitely tell if we're playing or not. But we also need to know who won. So this dot, I guess like the won state, like who won. We do need to know that. So I guess like who won. It could also be like a win message, but let's just like who won. And we don't know what that is right now. So we just have that be set to maybe an empty string just in case. But on our onNotify, instead of game over, we're gonna say player 1. So if the player won, this dot plain is false. But we're also gonna set this dot who won equals you won. Maybe I should do message. Win, like game over message. That makes more sense. Okay. So game over message is you won. And now else if the event is equal to events.ai1, this dot plain, this dot is plain becomes false. This dot game over message equals can't use that kind of quotes. I can't believe you suck so much. I mean, because you should be able to win against the AI. Of course, like in this one, like, I didn't give you a paddle. That's besides the point. Don't pay attention to that. Now we can use this game over message. So instead of just game over, we're going to use this dot game over message. Now we have to figure out like how, like we have to dynamically figure out where the text is. I think actually there is a way for me to just say, you know what, if I just say 0 and 0, I needed to go look at that. There is a way in P5.js to just set a box of where like this message is going to be and have it be in the center of that. So in reference here, let's go to text typography, text, yeah, see, I could give it like an entire box. So I could put the entire screen or the entire arena that we have for it. And then I need to, okay, text align, center should put it right into the center of that box. So that's the starting position. And then I think it's going to be the width. So that's going to be width and a height. And then I need, apparently we can do text align. Oh, we need to do this ahead of time. So text align. as center, center. So if I do that, let's try this here and see if like our game over message is centered on the screen appropriately. There we go. Oh, that's interesting. This is because we're still updating the screen. Like we're still running the update. Like the game is still happening behind the scenes. We're just not drawing the game out, but the update method is still happening. So, we take a look at this, every single frame, update is happening and render is happening. How to emotionally confuse a player. Absolutely, yeah, like, you're doing so great, you suck. You're doing so great, you suck. So in the event, we have this render and we have this if that is playing. We also need to do this exact same thing here on update. So if this dot is playing, we're gonna go ahead and run these. And so now we won't be so confusing emotionally to the players. Now we can play, we hit the end, and that's it. We won in this specific case. And it doesn't sort of like, nothing else happens. It just, it's the end. And we can leave this as long as we want and feel good about ourselves because we won. And so this is the classic observer pattern. We have this singleton that we're able to like register observers with, and then send these notifications out. Now this events here, this is where it gets a little bit interesting. This is essentially an enum that we invented here. So like when I do this in Rust, I can use an enum to just basically say if the player scored. Even with TypeScript, you still have to set like, the string that is set to. You'll see this pattern a lot. Even though we don't really care about this, all we care about is this side. But it's actually doing the checks on the string. That being said, I attended a talk by Uncle Bob Martin recently, and he talked about that this is actually an anti-pattern in good object-oriented design, and that's because this is what's tightly connecting all of our code together. At this point in time, our score here on notify, it needs to be aware of the event system in this way. If we didn't have this and we had to just put in the strings itself, we lose the type safety. I mean, except if we're in JavaScript like this. But if we're in like TypeScript or Rust or anything else, we lose the type safety, but we gain the ability to completely separate them. And now Score has literally no idea where these events are coming from. And now we can have multiple event systems. Now we can have, now our event system can completely change, and we can manually send it through some other system, and it's just fine. So that's, am I gonna decouple it? I don't know. Probably not for this one. There's another method of observer pattern that I want to go into next. And I think I'd rather spend my time doing that. This is just, I want you to be aware of that you don't have to do this system, even though this is going to be the tool that we want to pull out every single time. And I still sometimes, like, even though Uncle Bob talked about it, and he has been a consultant about object-oriented programming for a long time, and a lot of people look up to him for like, this is the correct way to do it. I don't know. I go back and forth on whether or not I like that pattern, or whether or not I want the ability to constrain myself. And like, these are all the events that can possibly happen. The clean code dude. Yes, he is the clean code author. So let's go ahead and push this code up. I'm gonna actually close all these. Yep, they're all saved. We're in the class observer pattern. So, implemented observer pattern using a class. And I'll push that code up. All this code is available at Bang repo. So if you want to go take a look at it, there it is where it is. We're obviously in this branch class observer pattern. So let's come back to master now. And we are immediately back to just this, the good old boring game. And we've lost some of our files and some of the basic things are going on. So what if I don't want to do classes, like a singleton for that? There's another option. And this one I have a little bit less familiarity with, but I think is also like a very valid option, especially in a weakly typed language like JavaScript. I could create individual events. Like I could create the actual events as objects. So if I have an event system that just spits out, so let's put it in here for right now. If I have like a function event system, and this event system doesn't really care anything about it, it just spits out, like essentially we're gonna make this a closure. It's gonna spit out an object. So we're gonna return an object here. And objects in JavaScript that are done like these are closures, will have access to the internal state. So I could now pass this object that I get out of it around to whoever needs to notify and whoever needs to be notified. So if I now have like methods on these objects, like notify, this could take in an event. And if I call this function, we now like, it needs to essentially call like whoever registered with it to be notified. So I wonder if I can do observers. So like this dot observers, like that. This will also be like a very specific event for this. Now on this notify, I want to loop through all these observers. Actually, it's just going to be observers like this, const observers. Not this. We're not in object-oriented now. Now we're in functional. So we're going to loop through the observers. So observers.forEach. We're going to take the observer and we're going to call on notify on them. So I don't think we're going to get away from that entire system. So observers.on notify. I mean, like, but maybe we can. Okay, so observers.on notify and pass it in this event. And that's pretty simple here. We're also going to have a register, which is going to take an observer and this, not this, observers.push observer. And that's pretty much it. Comma. So now our event system here is just a simple function. This generates event system. And essentially it's a factory that creates observers for us. I guess I could call it a factory. An event factory. I don't need to call new with this. And I think that's like a really important keyword of why I'm not going to capitalize the first letter. This is not a constructor function. It's going to generate these events for us. So now up in here, let's create some events. So we have what's the first event that we cared about? We have the scored event. So we can actually have different events for different ones. We can have the player scored event. So player scored event equals event system factory, and that's it. Like, we don't have to pass anything in. We just want this like plain by itself. Now we can use it to add, register observers, and then notify. Call the notify on it. So who needs to know about the player scored? Well, the score does, but only the player score needs to know this. So this is really interesting here. We're gonna pass in the player scored, reference to the player scored event here. And then the ball is going to be potentially notifying. So the ball needs to know about the player scored event as well. Of course, when we create lots of balls, we need to add them in. So new ball, player scored event goes in there. Okay, so let's now go into, now when we create an AI score, it's gonna need a completely different scored event. So let AI scored event AI scored event equals our event system factory, like this. And we're going to pass that in to the AI score here. And the balls now need to, so this is the negative about this pattern. The balls need to know about all these different events. It's the AI scored event, and down here, or where is it? AI scored event. I mean, not necessarily like too huge of a problem. Let's go check out score. So this is now going to be like the event that comes in. So the scored event is a method that comes in now. What's interesting, wait a second, that's render. We don't care about there. We care about it here. What's really interesting now is it doesn't have to care about what specific event is coming in. It just is gonna store this in here. So this dot scored event. Are we going to? Yeah, we need to register ourselves in here, but also store it. Actually, no, we don't. We could just wrong one. We need to go over here. This we don't need to do this at all. The scored event dot register. This. There we go. Now we've just registered ourselves as an observer of this specific event, and now we're gonna have to have that on notify method. So in on notify, we take in an event, if the event happens, so if scored event, let's see, how do we tell, like, I guess, do I want to like store this as a scored event in? Because I might want to store the scored event and then it will notify out if it happened. And then we don't even have to have a register. It just sort of emits. But then, of course, how do I check to see because we have the observers, we have like the notify, but then we need to know everyone else if it's been notified. Now, if we have a reference to this specific object, I don't necessarily know if it can call it. So we need to register. We do need to register the observers. Oh, I think I need to. Let's see. We register on notify. I think I need to register a very specific function with this. And so instead of observers, it's going to be the functions to be called. I think that's what I want to do. So I just want the increment method. We're going to do this dot score plus equals to 1. And we want to now register this dot increment. And I think this works through like the closure method. Like increment has access to here. And then in the game, we're just going to run all of the sort of like the observer functions. So these aren't really like observers. These are now our like callbacks. So you should be called back, a specific callback, and you are a specific callback. In fact, we want just to call you. So we just call you. Now we have scored event. We register this dot increment. I'm actually not like completely sure that this is going to be correct and it's going to access to it, but we're going to find out together. So if I do that, now the score, the AI score is going to register under the AI scored event, and the player score is going to register under, its increment under the player scored event. So now the balls are going to be in charge of calling each of these, like running the notify on them. So let's head into ball. So we're going to take in, what was the order? It does have to be aware of what these are. So player scored and AI scored. So player scored event, AI scored event. It needs to store these away. So this dot player scored event equals player scored event. Okay, now when this bounce happens, this is less than zeros. This means the AI scored. So this AI scored event dot notify. Now notice we don't really care about passing anything in, do we? So here, this entire event, we don't need it. Like, it is the event. Now, if I need any like metadata to like pass in any data for that, I could handle that here. Right now, it's just a very simple event. I'm not passing anything back and forth as part of this. This dot player scored event dot notify. Let's see whether or not I did this right. So we refresh. Uncaught profits, reference error, observers not defined. Right. Game.js, line 55. So these are now callbacks. And I might as well rename to you to correct, so callback. Let's try it again. So does this score increment? No, instead we get an error. All right, what happened? Callbacks is not a function. Game.js line 51 is callback singular that we want to call here. Now let's see if AI scores. Can't access property score. This is undefined. Okay, so that's what I was afraid of a little bit. Although, you know what? Where was that? That's this increment right here. So it's this.score, right? Score.js line 17, yeah. So this is undefined, unfortunately. Now we're passing this.increment into here. Now in game, we're using an arrow function, which may or may not destroy this. Let's try just a normal function. So function that takes a callback and then runs said callback. So if I do that, do you work? Or are we gonna have to figure out something else with that? Yeah, no, it doesn't work. So this is still undefined. We'd have to do some clever thing where we pass in. Would that work? Actually, I think this would work. Okay. I think I can come back to the arrow function here. So how many of you remember off of score? So when we register, it can't be just this dot increment. It's going to be this dot increment dot. Oh, what was it called? It's been so long since I've had to do this with JavaScript. There is three things. There's call. There is apply. And what's the other one? The one I actually care about. We may have to go to MDN for this. MDN, there's like call, apply, bind. Yes, Chantilly, you're right. So we need to bind this function, and we're going to pass in the this argument for this. So what bind does, it returns a function. So it returns this increment function, but it binds this to that function so that when it's called, the this function, the this is exactly what I want it to be. So let's see if this works for us. Thank you, Chantilly. There we go. And so now our AI scored off of that because the this is preserved in sending in what versions we've got. So let's go over this because this might be, if you're not familiar with JavaScript or you've only familiar with modern JavaScript and haven't had to like work with this in a while, then you might be a little bit confused by bind. Am I doing functional on one file and OO for another file? It's actually just like in branches, but like, yes, there's a lot of OO around, but now there's functional combined with OO, which actually is one of my favorite ways of programming. Is sort of like use object-oriented for like generating classes and encapsulating little pieces of data inside of classes where it makes sense. But instead of singletons, make these sort of like functions that handle this type of thing. So we have this scored event. Now this scored event, the score doesn't know what type of event it is. It could be the AI scored event. It could be the player scored event. It doesn't really care. It just knows that it's a scored event for itself. So object-oriented in this case is like this type. Doesn't really matter. We register ourselves with the function increment, and we bind the entire this value, which is going to be the specific instance of this score, into this increment method. So this this is basically another function here. So we can create our own closure and our own bind if we really want to, and then pass that in. It's not really like all that necessary. Bind handles this for us. We're binding this to increment. We get a completely different function out of this, and then we come back to game here. So when we call register, we get the callback, which is increment in this specific case, it gets added to the callbacks array. And then when it's notified, it loops through this array and then calls the callback. It doesn't have to be aware of the this value. That's already bound into that function. Now we generate two events, the player scored event and the AI scored event, and we hand them to the player score and the AI score, and then we have to hand both of them to the balls, because the balls need to be aware of which event it's going to fire. So this takes care, like remember I was talking about that an events enum kind of thing that we created? No longer. We now just create specific events and pass those around, and everything's fine at that point. So let's say we wanted to like redo everything that we did for the other one. So we wanted there to be an arena. So let's go ahead and create the arena class for ourselves and have it figure that out. But do we really need an arena class? Like that's a really good question now. Because the reason why we did the arena class was for that event system. To register itself with this in. The event that we want now is game over event. So let's add that in. So let's just go straight to like the end. We know we were going to want the player one event. So player one event, and let AI one event. We're going to want to create these now. So player one event equals event system factory, and AI one event equals the event system factory. Okay, so now who cares about these? Well, like our arena cares about it. We want to have our callback called if we won or not. So if we have just like a function for the arena, notice I'm creating all like just the functions in this main game here. I think I'm showing that because like all the other ones are classes, and then the functions go in here. We could definitely create another file and like have the arena function in there too. So let's put like the arena in here. And so here's where it gets a little bit interesting, because we could have this be a closure that then returns an object that we have like these other things on. Do we really need that? I don't know. Let's figure out. So the first thing we want is, as soon as the game over event happens, we want to display the game over text on. So we know we're gonna want in arena the is plain. So is plain, and this is gonna be true to begin with. Actually, this is a function. So this is a const is plain equals true. Okay. If is plain, then we're gonna have like a render method. So we can definitely make this a closure here. We can return, and we're gonna have a render method. And then we can say inside of here, if is plain, then we're gonna have that entire text size is, what did we decide it was gonna be? Like 124. And then we're gonna have our text, which for right now, we could just say game over. We can have like that message at the end. Actually, we kind of, that kind of makes it easy for us to do. Let's, I want to do too much programming before I like actually test this out. So for right now, let's just do like a big giant game over, and we'll center this. So I think it was text align. center, center. And this is going to be 0, 0, width, height. Okay, so if we're plain, we probably don't want to do that. Else. So we really want to do this one. Now, like, that's not necessarily a really good pattern to like have nothing in the if, but we're going to put stuff in here later. So for right now, it's probably okay. Now we need to create an arena for ourselves. And then we're going to, then at that point, we're just going to run the arena render in the main game. And we need to hook up the events to it. So let's do let arena. This is, I mean, it's kind of like an arena factory. The thing is, there's only one of them. You know, we have that entire like callback system too. Do we even really need this this plane? I don't think we need to do this. I think I was doing that other system a little bit too much. I think what we need is just up here, we're gonna have a let is plane. We don't need that. We're gonna do all this stuff in here. So in setup, we have is plane equals true. Now inside of our draw, we're gonna be able to do an entire like is plane here. So if is plane is true, then we want to update the balls. We potentially want to add a ball. The background gets drawn to black no matter what. We want to draw the arena. We want to render the scores. And we want to render the balls. Now, otherwise, we want to have that giant game over. I probably didn't need to like delete all the stuff that I did. I need to redo that now, but we'll just say, okay, text size is going to be 124. Text align is going to be center, and then text is going to be game over. 0, 0, width, and height. Okay, so that should handle like this is plane, and now we just need to flip the is plane around. So just for my own edification, I want to make sure, okay, so it's still working, so I haven't broken that. We need the ability now to say like, okay, are we not playing? So if the game is over, and so we have these AI1 event and the player1 event, we need to pass those into the scores here. So if the player score can like, hey, we won, we didn't win. And then we can register a function in these two events. So we can say AI1 event dot register, and it's going to be just a function here. So we're going to do if the AI1 is plain becomes false. If the player1, so the player1 event dot register is plain equals false. All right, we're gonna find out whether or not this works, whether or not it like has access to this scope inside of the function that we're passing in. I think it does off the top of my head, but you know we'll find out pretty quickly if it does not. Now down here, that should set it to be false right away. The scores need to be to have access to, okay, so the AI score, if it wins, the AI is going to get the AI one event. It can only possibly win. The player score can get the player one event. We can now go to the score.js and we can get the one event. And every time that we increment now, we can track to see if, oh, we need to store these. So this dot one event equals one event. If this dot score, let's have like win at, this dot win at equals to 7. So if this dot score is now greater than or equal to this dot win at, we now want to call this dot one event dot notify. So that happens when we won. Let's find out whether or not this works. So first of all, there's like the score system, everything else. All right, haven't broken anything. Let's go force, make a win happen a little bit faster by adding lots of balls. Now with balls, do we need to pass in anything else? It's just these player scored event, AI scored event. We don't need anything else, so we should just be able to create a whole bunch of them. And we got our game over. So that works. Now, is playing equals false, we can do our like game over message too here. So let game over message. We could set this to be just sort of like empty to begin with. I could just set this to be an empty string right now. And then is plain as false. We want to definitely make sure that you are, so is plain equals false. Also, I want to multi-line you. And then we also want to set this message event. So this is game over message. It is now going to be set to the AI1. Really? How about that? And the player one event, I'm gonna make you a multi-line function. And game over message is there was no doubt you were going to win. Great job. That might be too long. Okay, so we're gonna save you, and then in this game over, we're just gonna use game over a message. And then everything just works. There was no doubt you're gonna win. Great job. So let's go over what we did, because this is, in a way, fundamentally different than the object-oriented event system that we did here. So we created this event system factory. It's just a very simple function here. It returns objects that have access to an internal state. So it's a classic JavaScript closure. It has access to these callback functions. So this is our like big, huge difference between the object-oriented event system and this event system. We have just an array of callback functions. We don't even care that it's like full objects. They're just functions now. When we register, we're just registering these callbacks and adding them in. And when somebody notifies this specific event, we just call the callback functions. Now we could potentially take in data on the notify and pass it into the callback. that's something we can definitely do. So if somebody wanted to say what the score was, then we can like add something in and like, you know, make things happen. We create these events by just creating specific variables to hold each event. So it's no longer one event system that holds everything. It's now we have a very specific player scored event variable, a very specific AI scored event variable. If this specific variable fires, like only the objects or functions really that want to be called get called. That was the other thing in the I mean, it's both good and bad. Like, it depends upon what your use case is. In the object-oriented method, everyone got called with every single event, which makes that, you know, maybe you're getting events that you don't care about. In this case, we have the scoring system. So let's go over to the score. The score gets the scored event here and registers on it and says, hey, I want to increment. So this is the function I want to run. I want to increment whenever this event happens. Now I'm having to bind this in so it actually has access to this score. If I was making these as closures and doing this as a very not object-oriented way, but as a more more functional way, I might not have to do this. You got you at AI, haha. Let's see. So it just basically means that I don't have to like register with this anymore. I register with a specific function. The side effect here is the ball has to now be aware of all these different events that could possibly happen. So it's not just a single event system, and we pass that in. The benefit is non-classes, so non-objects, can now listen to and be aware of the event system. So for example, here we have our full game. It now looks completely different than the object-oriented game that we created in the other branch. It's still just here. It is able to track itself. Hey, are we playing? But if there's one of these one events, we can now flip this is playing to false and set the game over message just right here. And then we can handle that is playing all right here. No need to create an arena class or an arena function or anything else. We can just handle it all right here and everything is fine. And those are the two methods that I know, right? Like right off the bat to do these sort of like event system handling. And both of them are absolutely reasonable, and both of them can be done with, without that much problems. And I think they're really awesome. The other thing is I'm able to do this all in one go because it's not really a full workday for me. So I'm able to do this longer stream. Now, do any of you have any questions? I'd be happy to sort of like answer any questions or anything else. To sort of show that we're at the end of like the normal thing, I'll turn the stack it game that we have back on. There's that. If you want to play that, it's just bang drop. It's the color of your Twitch chat. But yeah, so do any of you have any questions or thoughts, comments? It's pretty clean. Which one do you like the most? Let's, I want to switch back to just doing one at a time. Not sure which one you like. I go back and forth too, because I think like both of the event systems are actually really nice. Having the object-oriented event system, especially if you're doing object-oriented classes or have inherited this entire object-oriented system, you could add that event system in and decouple some, like if you're passing objects back and forth, like, you know, the, if you've passed the score into the ball, you can separate that out in order to try to like decouple that, and the event system can really help with that. Before I forget, we're in master. Let's go ahead and create a branch here. So this is going to be a functional observer pattern. View these changes. Stage them all, and so I created the observer pattern using a functional programming style. And push that up. So again, if you want to look at that code, it is bang repo, and you can go and take a look at that code. We have like sort of like the beginning area where, you know, we just have the game playing without any scoring happening, and then we have the branch where we're not using any kind of pattern whatsoever. Then we have a branch where we use an object-oriented pattern, and a branch where we're using a functional observer pattern. Well, I guess in that time we ended up getting the AI one. Well, that's too bad. But I think that's all I ended up having for today. So I am. You like the comments on the game humorous? Yeah, I saw some other people like finishing their games with like these type of snarky end. I'm like, oh, I want to do that. Like just a lot more fun than just like game over or something else like that. I hope that this observer pattern is helpful for you, and I hope that you can like use this to decouple or like just untangle some nasty code that you have maybe at work. I really like using games to sort of show off these because first of all, it's fun to make, and you know, these are like my personal stuff, and also I think it's boring if I was to like make some kind of like observer pattern in with like a chat bot or something, which I totally could do, and I've actually used the observer pattern in that way, like for like a chat system. It's perfect for that, especially if you want multiple things to happen for each chat message. Perfect use case for it. But I hope this is helpful for you. I think with this, I'm gonna go ahead and start winding down the stream. I've pushed all this code up. I will archive this over to YouTube. I'm about like a week behind or so on the YouTube videos going up to YouTube, but the archive is going to be here on Twitch, you know, for at least 2 weeks, and I'll create a highlight of it as well. So thank you everybody for stopping by and watching this. I've been doing these streams every single weekday morning from 7 a.m. Mountain Time until around 8:15, which is when I usually have to start getting ready for work. Today is different because it's a holiday today. I sometimes do sort of like live coding where I'm learning these things, and then other times when I know them, I switch over and like do the tutorial like this, where I actually show off what I've learned. Dota, random question: how much does an app cost to build for someone? Well, so that is a highly dependent answer on like a lot of things. Like for example, are you talking about for yourself or hiring somebody to build the app? Or like, are you talking about how much do you want to charge for it? Say someone came to you and said, I have 20K. What do you do? Okay, so you're going to build the app for somebody else and you want to know how much to charge for it. essentially. Physics, hello, good morning. Well, it's I've not really been a freelancer. So first of all, like caveat, I am going to base my answers off of what I think that I would do if I tried to freelance, or what I've heard some of my friends who are freelancers do. First of all, take what you want to make per year. Like imagine that this was a full-time job and you're trying to make this per year. Then figure out how much you need to make. This includes what you need for any kind of health insurance. So if you're in America, you need to cover that yourself. There's no taxes that like go to that. So well, that might end up having to be like $150,000 a year. Divide that in half, and that's your annual like hourly rate. So if let's say $100,000 a year, that would now be $50 per hour is what you need to be making. And then sort of like take that and figure out how many hours do you think that it's going to take for this this application to make. That's really dangerous because if they don't give you all the requirements, you could end up being on the hook for building something out. So I would recommend, if possible, work on them on a commission basis where you say, hey, I will work for you for 2 weeks. It's going to be 40 hours a week at $50 an hour, however much that is. And then we're going to like agile style. I'll deliver to you what I've done in 2 weeks. You can now rehire me again. And sort of like this, that's what agile is all about. You get this sort of cadence of here's my stuff that I've done. Give me my money. I work on more stuff. Give me money. Work on more stuff. And then you get into this partnership with your client. So based on what you want to make and how long it takes, pretty much like that's the real, like it's not really that complicated. The complicated part is the customer communication and trust, and wanting to make sure that they're getting their money worth and trying to make sure that it doesn't become this adversarial relationship where they're trying to get as much value out of you without paying you, and you're trying to get as much money from them without doing the work. If you want to avoid that if possible. You've been kind of thrust into this situation. My recommendation, Dota, find a mentor who has done this in the past and just talk with them about what you're doing. And that might be going like onto a Discord where there's a bunch of developers and asking, hey, is there any freelancers? And chatting with them. You're in a local dev group, then perfect. I know like Denver devs, for example, there's plenty of freelancers there. And I know plenty of people sort of like chat about those things back and forth. Yeah, see if there's any freelancers, see if they can answer any questions for you. There's a freelancer meetup group that meets remotely, and they have their own Slack in Denver. So find out if there's like a freelancer meetup group in your area. They might be willing to take you in and hang out with you and like just give you tips and advice. But that's my suggestion for it. You're in a small town compared to Denver. Join the closest big city that you are to. So if that makes sense. I don't think they're gonna care that you're like, several hours away. There's just gonna be more people there, and like there's people in the Denver group from Boulder or from where is it? Some of the other ones. There's like tiny little cities out away, and they come in. Virtual meetups are a thing too. Yeah, it's a come on, it's COVID. Nobody's even meeting in person anymore. There's no reason not to join any meetup anywhere. Anyways, I think I've already done like my ending spiel. So I think with that, I'm just gonna go ahead and switch to my ending scene. Again, thank you everybody for stopping by, and I'm going to go ahead and move on to the rest of my day. I don't think I'm going to be able to stream today, probably not this weekend, so I expect to see you all on Monday. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time.